Hello everyone, and welcome to this edited tutorial for Legend of Grimrock 2. In this tutorial we are gonna take a look at how we can take a custom 3D object, create a simple animation for it and bring it inside our game. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to take a sign that I have created. I'm going to rig it up for animation. I'm going to create a simple animation for it, and then I'm going to bring it into my mod. So I have my mod over here, and if we take a look at it, I have these doors in the mod, and I'm going to create a sign that's going to be extended out from the door frame and be hanging above the door. So I have the sign over here. This is just a static mesh. I haven't done anything to it. And I also, in this scene, I have the door frame from my mod, just so that the mass is positioned precisely where I want it to be relative to the door frame. So of course I don't need the door frame, so I'm gonna just throw that out. But this object is the one I need, and that's the sign. I have already UV mapped the object, and I have placed a texture on it, and the texture I'm using is one that comes with Legend of Grimrock 2. It's available in the asset pack. It's called Mind Support. So if we take a look at how it's textured, this is how the sign is looking when the material is applied to it. Of course, the benefits of using an existing texture from Grimrock is it spares me the work of texturing, and also it will limit the footprint of my mod regarding to size. So all the custom things that people can add to the mod will of course bring it up in size, and therefore make it difficult to place on Steam Workshop, for example, where the limitation of the size is 100 megabytes. So I try to make it a habit to, if I possibly can, always use existing materials from Grimrock 2, and there are a lot of materials that come with the game. So let me just turn on screencast keys here. Yep, so you can see what I'm doing. Like I said, this is just a static mesh, and before we start animating it, there are a couple of things that we need to be aware of, and before we start animating, this should always be something that we keep in mind, and that's it's extremely important, the orientation of the object and its position within 3D space. For example, you can see the 3D gizmo here. For Grimrock specifically, that this gizmo is pretty correct. If I'm facing the object like this, I am facing it front on. So this is the front of the object. This is the object to its sides. This is the other side, and this is from the back. So the gizmo, the origin gizmo, is pretty accurate in that way. So of course, if we take a look at, if I open up just some model from the asset pack, maybe a wall or something, yeah, like a wall. You can see when I open it up, the wall, I'm looking at it from behind basically, and I need to rotate it 180 degrees to be viewing it head on, or viewing the front of it. That's basically what's going to happen here, is that when I've exported this model out, it will be orientated in this way from within the Grimrock model toolkit, and I need to rotate it to be viewing it head on. So keep in mind the orientation of the model, and like I can show you here, there's no rotation or anything applied to the model. Of course I've changed the location, but scaling and rotation are just default. So let's start rigging. I'm going to be using extremely simple rig, and since this is just a sign that's going to swing back and forth above the door, I think I can get away with making it look decent with about 4 bones, something like that. So let's bring the first bone in. Here it is. This is the start of our armature, and let's turn on X-ray so I can always see it. The only thing that is important when I bring this rig into the scene is the rotation of the rig. So I'm going to start by rotating it 90 degrees on the axis, like this. From now on, I'm not going to touch the rotation of the rig in any way whatsoever. Of course, I'm going to rotate it a little bit during the pose, but as it is regarding to the scene, it's rotated 90 degrees on the x-axis. So don't do this if you're aligning the bone in any way. Don't start rotating the bone itself and changing the rotation of the armature. You will have extremely weird results if you do that. So keep it fixed at 90 degrees. If we need to change how the armature is, we simply do it like this. We just drag it around without changing the rotation in any way. So this is the first bone of the armature. This bone is basically just going to sit here up at the sign, and it's going to be weighted down to the pole and the hooks over here. So now I'm going to extrude another bone from the armature. Going to split it and take it over here. This is going to be controlling the chain, just like this. Going to create another bone. Yep, something like this. And the final one. I hit the wrong key and created another armature, so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to extrude this bone, and I'm going to split it. I went one above where I separated it, but just like this. So now I have 4 bones placed around my object. I only have a single armature, and that armature has bone 1, 2 and 4. So let's just go ahead and renaming those so we can always understand what they are. This is the sign. This is the chain right. This is the chain left. And this is the bar. I'm going to take this sign and I'm going to parent it to one of the chains, just to the chain right. The reason I do that is it will make it easier for me to animate later on. So if I'm in post mode and if I'm moving this around, it will also move the sign. So I'm simply thinking about how easy it will be for me to animate this. Now that we have our rig in place. I'm gonna recalculate all the selected bones, the rotation of them. It's a habit. And with the object selected, I'm going to shift click the armature, so I have the object selected and then the armature selected. Hit Ctrl P, and I'm going to parent the object to the armature with automatic weights. So let's do that, and that's done. What I just did is that now I have the bones have been weighted to the object, but of course it will be far from perfect. So if we take a look at the weight paint, which is now an option since I have parented this to an armature, you can see that this is how this particular bone is affecting the sign. You can see that it's not the red is a weight of 1 and the blue is a weight of 0, and you can see that it's not going to affect the hooks that are coming out of the sign, which of course is something that I wanted to do. So if I move this, you can see how it's deforming, and this is of course not what we want to do. And you can see that this is also affecting the sign, this is affecting the hook, it's affecting the hook of the bar, but I only wanted it to be affecting the chain, and this has not been weighted to anything except for some small vertices. So this is the first thing I need to fix. I need to weight paint this down, and with this bone selected, I'm going to go to the weight painting tools. I'm going to weight it down to 1, which is the maximum. Bring maybe the radius up a bit. Gonna select a particular face like this. So like this. So now that it's impossible for me to paint outside of the sign, which is really handy. And now I can start just painting these vertices, and you can see how I'm changing the weight of the object. So this particular bone will be controlling the sign 100%. So that's done like this. Then of course I need to move on to the hooks and weight the hooks down like this. And if I switch to this bone, you can see I don't want this bone to be affecting the hook at all. So I will put this down to 0 and remove the weights of that bone to that hook, and while I'm at it, that bone should not be affecting the sign in any way. So this is manual work, but setting up a good rig for something, it's gonna take time depending on the complexity of the model. Fortunately, this is not so complex, but you get the idea that what I'm trying to achieve here is that this bone is affecting the sign, the hook over here, and it's not affecting the chain in any way or the bar above it. This bone should only be affecting the chain, not the hooks. Same over here, only the chain, not the hooks, not any part of the sign. And this bone here should be affecting the bar, keeping the bar in place like this. And it should also be affecting the hooks, since they are part of the bar. I'm gonna skip ahead since I've already done this. So now I have my sign set up, so this bone is weighted down to precisely the correct vertices. This bone is only affecting the chain. Same over here, and like we talked about, that this bone is going to keep the bar in place. It's easy to test this. If we go to pause mode for the armature, you can see that if I move this around, it's only taking the bar and the hooks. We parented this, so this is working correctly, and this is only taking the chain, nothing else, and this is only taking the sign and the hooks that are part of the sign. So once we've done this, we can now start animating the object. And animation for the object, since this is just a sign swinging back and forth, it will just be a small little animation, nothing fancy. So I think I'm gonna take about 120 frames to do this. Go to the first frame. I'm going to select both the chains, and I'm going to make sure that I'm looking down the correct axis, which I am. And I'm going to rotate the sign just a little bit forward, and then I'm gonna bring the sign down a bit like this and take it forward so it's going to sit correctly in the chain. So this is the starting frame of our animation. With the starting frame, I'm going to select all the bones, and I'm going to create a keyframe for this particular pose. And since there are only two things that I'm changed, was the location and rotation. I rotated some bones and I moved one bone a little bit forward, so I did not scale anything. So I'm just gonna lock down the location and rotation. So I'm gonna lock it down for the first frame of the animation. I'm going to jump forward to the last frame and lock it down there as well. Then I'm going to go to the middle of the animation, which is about 60 frames, and I'm going to move it backwards like this, so we can rotate this backwards and do exactly the same. Place it within the chain, select all the bones, and create a keyframe for it. So if we play this back, the sign should be swinging back and forth. It's going a little bit too much to the back, so we can easily fix that by going to the 60 frames and just bring it back a little. So turn on the textures. This is looking okay. So this is the idle animation of the sign. So it's just swinging back and forth. Of course, we can fine-tune this. We could change the starting frame, and yeah, you can spend some time in fine-tuning the animation to your liking. But the thing I'm looking at is just, yeah, if it's believable that this is, you know, swinging back and forth, and of course nobody will look at that sign in such scrutiny once he's playing the mod. He will sign, just walk past it in 2 seconds and never realize the time that went into this. So with the animation complete, it's time for me to export it out. However, there's going to be a problem, and I'm going to deliberately make that problem, since I think this is the biggest issue that most people run into when they are trying to get animations to work within Grimrock, and that is that things will move about in an unexpected way once they have the model and the animation file within the Grimrock toolkit. The reason for this is the origin, or the position of both the armature and the object. So if I select the armature, you can see where the gizmo is located at. This is the origin of the armature, and this is the origin of the object. So if I would to export this out like this, this model would simply be lying on the floor, and everything below the bar would be under the ground, since this is the origin. So for example, if you take a look at the the wall that we had here, this wall has a node which tells the engine where the origin of the model is, and that node is precisely on the floor in the middle of the tile. So that's why the object is in its correct place. If the origin would be in the middle of the model, when we would load it here, the origin would be always here in the middle, and half of the wall would be, going into the ground. So let's just do this so people can perhaps understand this better. With the armature selected, with inside our pause mode, I'm going to go to pause, animation, and I'm going to bake it. So I'm going to have all the bones selected, sorry. So I'll bake everything. I'm going to bake it, I'm going to bake the pause. I have only selected bones and I have them all selected. Bake from frame 1 to 120. So you can see now that every frame of that animation is now a keyframe, and that's the way we want it. So with this done, there's nothing left for me to do except go to File, Export, and I'm going to export this out as an FBX model. I'm going to export it directly into the GrimFBX folder, and there's one thing here that people need to change. Default, this is selected as 7.4 binary, but since I'm using the GrimFBX tool to convert the FBX animation to something that Grimrock understands, I need to be using 6.1 ASCII. So default is like this. The only thing you change in the export settings of the FBX is bring it down to 6.1 from 7.2. Let's just call this SX Urban Town Sign and export it. So now in the folder I have an FBX file that is the model and the animation. To separate these two, I simply drag it to the GrimFBX and release. It pumps out my model along with the animations. This is all the same animation. It's just a naming convention, so I get 3 of them. But if I open this up, you will see what I was talking about. This is exactly what I was talking about. Since the origin was never corrected, it's looking at, if we select it all, it's looking at this point over here as the origin of the armature, and therefore that's getting signed to the middle, and all my model is just beneath the ground. So this is one of the things that people run into. But you can see the bones, they are in the correct place. So if I go to load the animation from the GrimFBX folder, as soon as I start playing the animation, the model jumps. And I've seen a lot of custom objects that have this in a way that the model is not in the same place as the bones. So everything seems to be working okay. So when people within the game, when the animation is playing, the object is in its correct position. But there's a huge disadvantages of not fixing this, and that is the bounding boxes are not being transformed. So now the bounding box of the model sits beneath the ground, and what that's going to do is that if the view or the camera of the player, if it's not able to see the bounding box, the engine will think that the model is not in view and stops rendering it. That's the reason why many custom objects, when you're looking about, they will blink in and out. They will simply vanish and then come back in and vanish. And that's mostly because of incorrect bounding boxes for the model. But this is an extremely easy fix. Some people go about it by taking the model and transforming it within the model toolkit. Don't do that. Fix it from the source. That's always the best. So for example, if I have the object selected, you can see that the origin of the object is here, but what I really want is to have the origin in the exact center of the grid. So I simply press Shift C. What Shift C did was to center the view, but more importantly, it moved the 3D cursor, which was over here, it moved it directly to the center of the grid. Now it comes really easy for us just to go to the transform and say, please move the origin to the 3D cursor. Done. We are going to select all our armature. The 3D cursor is still in the center, and again, in object mode, we're going to choose the object and move the origin to the 3D cursor, like this. So both the object and the armature have their starting origin at the center of the grid. So if I export this out again, just override this one. Oh, sorry. Here we go. So these are all wrong. I'm going to delete those. And yeah, if you want to see the output of the FBX, that you can also just run it in a command line. We can go to the GrimFBX directory, and I can run it just like this, and instead of dragging the file towards the GrimFBX, I can drag it to this window and release it, and it will do the same thing for me. It will just complete it with success, no warnings, nothing wrong. So people can do that also. If you have some troubles and you don't know why, take a look at the output, because if you have too many weights per vertices, if you have some double vertices and so forth, the GrimFBX will tell you about it. It will display warnings. So, but this is clean, so this is good. So if I open this up now, you can see that the sign is gone. Oh my god, what did we do? Export it again. That was funky. Here we go. I didn't have the object selected, I had the armature selected, so when I exported, Of course I didn't get the object, so now we have way too many windows open here. Let's just do this again so I have the correct window. So now you can see that this is working like we wanted to. I'm looking it from behind, as with any other model with Grimrock, and I need to rotate it 180 degrees to have it in the correct view. If we go to load animations from the GrimFBX folder, I can now load the armature action, and doing so will start the animation. From here we can modify the animation if you wanna lower the FPS or something, but 30 frames per second is the default for Grimrock, so I'm not gonna change that. However, what I'm gonna do is I am going to rename this to SX Urban Town Sign Idle and update and save this modified animation. Sign idle, like this. Save. So in my GrimFBX folder I now have a animation for the sign that has the internal name correctly. This is just for my benefit later on. Recalculate the normals like we always need to do within the GrimFBX. Go to nodes, find the sign and apply the correct material for it, which was mine support, if I remember correctly. Like this. I'm gonna save this, save it to my models folder. This is called Access Urban Town Sign. Sounds good. Save. And now I have a model. I also have an animation, but the animation I have, it is for Grimrock 1. There has been a slight change in how the animation is built up with Grimrock 2, but I simply do exactly the same thing. I drag it over to the GrimAnimConverter and it spits out version 2 for me, which is correct according to Grimrock 2. And in my animations folder here, I can now just paste it and rename it. And now I have the animation in the correct folder. I also have the model in the correct folder. The only thing left to do is to create a object definition for it. I've already created it. It was simply commented out. So this is the object. It's called Urban Town Sign. This is the model. It points towards the model that we just created. We have a animation class assigned to the model, and the animation is called sway. It could be called swing. It could be called whatever. We point to our animations here. Access Urban Town Sign Idle. I hope that's what we called it. Access Urban Town Sign Idle. Yeah. When this initializes, we wanted to play the animation sway, which is the only animation to the object. Is this a loopable animation? Yes, it is. So we say loop true, and max update distance is 5. That simply tells the game when I'm 6 tiles away from this object, stop playing the animation. When I'm 5 tiles away or closer, please play the animation. So let's go into our game and hit Ctrl R. We should now have a new object called sign, which we don't have for some reason because I didn't save the file. Now I've saved the file. Ctrl R again to reload. sign. There it is. So if we place this here, and I believe this house is not on the ground floor. So now we have the sign over here. It's hanging above the door, and as you can see, it's swinging back and forth like we want it to. So if I start backing away, you can see that when I'm 5 tiles away from it, it's not swinging, just to save resources. If I come close to it, it starts swinging again. So now we are 1 way, 2, 3, 4. It's still swinging. We can hardly see it though. So when we are more far away, it simply stops, and that's precisely what we want. So now we have a cool sign hanging above our door. There are other objects that I have created in exactly the same manner. For example, these doors. These doors can be open and closed with a custom animation as well, and they were created in precisely the same way. So, for example, if we just if I load up something here, like here we have part of the door. This was created in exactly the same manner as I created the sign. There's no complex hierarchy in the scene or anything like that. It's simply an armature that has an object associated with it. And for example, if I play this, this is the opening of the door. Of course, this is not a loopable animation. This is just a and then we have another one that closes the door. But this is just one bone over here, and then we have one bone for the handle and another bone for this handle. So if we take a look at this, you can see that when I start playing this, the first thing that happens is that the bone, the handle starts moving up, and then the door starts sliding in, and when the door stops, the handle goes down again. So that's the animation that we are using here. These doors, you can grab them from the Nexus, and you can take a look at the code also behind them. I believe they are here. Yep. There are some other attributes to the doors as well. For example, the sign that we had only one animation, but the door has 2 animations, one active and one deactive. The active one is to open it, the deactive is to close it. And we have a clickable frame, so I can click the door, and when the door is clicked, I call for a play of animation, which is active, and when the door is on close, I call for the deactive one. So this is pretty straightforward. Also, another object that we have within this custom is the rope ladder, and the rope ladder really is exactly the same as the sign. This is just a model that has a looping idle animation to it. I don't remember if I have it. It was in the winter tile set, I believe. Yeah, it's here. So as you can see, this is the rope ladder. It has, more bones than the sign, of course, since I wanted the bones to affect it in a different way. So you can see how I weighted the ladder, the ladder down. So this one doesn't move at all, simply keeps the pillars in place, and then this bone affects the ladders as they ascend down. So if we played this, oh sorry, so if we play this, you can see that this is the animation that is being played within the game. And again, there's nothing, there's no huge hierarchy. This is just an armature and a mesh, and using these command line tools makes it quite easy to create something. The GrimFBX and the GrimAnimConverter. So I hope this will bring you somewhat closer to creating your own objects that have animations. Like I said, the most common error is models that disappear when you are moving around. And for example, if I had used the first version where the origin was down here and not up here, if I had moved the camera to about this position, the sign would have disappeared, because I'm no longer viewing the origin of the model. So the engine thinks, this model is not visible to the player anymore, so I'm gonna stop rendering it. So that's one of the most common mistakes I see, is that we have disappearing models, and that was actually a problem that I had with this door, was that this door, if I opened it up and if I moved here, it would disappear. This part of the door would disappear, because the bounding boxes and the origin of the model was behind me. So in order to fix that, I just went the lazy way, and this wall is a part of the door, so it's just not a animated part of the door. So for example, if I open that up for you, documents, almost human, into the urban models, we should have something called, there's a sign, where's the door? Here's the door. So the wall that is here is actually a part of the door. So for example, it is present here as well. It just becomes like a wooden structure behind the door, so people don't really notice it. But the main thing was that if I turn on the bounding boxes of this model, you can see that the bounding box of course stretches out in front of the wall. So when the player moved in and he would move past the door, we still have some bounding boxes to look at, and the engine says, hey, this model is still visible, I need to render it. So if I would have, if I would remove this wall, this tree wall, this one, if I would take this away from the model, I would run into the issue of, when I am in this position, this will simply disappear, this part of the door. So I fixed it in a way that, this is just a part of the door, and really works well, because you want somebody to stop here, because when the door is in this open position, you don't want somebody to be able to walk through it, since this door has no collision at all. But this was fixed in that way. But yeah, again, I'm gonna post a link to the tools that we are using. The GrimAnimConverter, that one was developed by Procile, and you can grab it from the forum, but I will post this link, so you can grab this tool, and also grab the GrimFBX from John's webpage. It's the same guy that created the Grimrock model toolkit, and on his webpage you can get is here, GrimFBX. He has some other tools as well for Grimrock editing and Grimrock modding. They are worth to take a look at, so check them out. But like I said, I hope this has brought you a little bit closer how we create simple animations and for simple objects. This method can be used for monsters as well, but we would have to create a lot of different animations, moving from left to right, from right to left, forward, backwards, rotating. So creating a monster is going to take considerable more time, but this method should be valid just as well to create some monsters for Grimrock 2. Maybe down the road we will do that, I don't know, but I hope you have learned something for now, so take care.